Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today, we are digging into a really critical argument from C.S. Lewis's classic, Mere Christianity. It's a line of thinking that, honestly, it pushes you to a decision point, a crossroads, and Lewis would say there's just no way around it. So, let's jump in.
Okay, so the whole thing really comes down to this one question. Lewis looks the problem of evil square in the face and says, yeah, this mess, this conflict we see all around us, it's a price God thought was worth paying for something else. The big question is, what is that something else?
And the answer to that question, that something else God thought was so valuable, is the very first step in Lewis's argument, the price of freedom. He kicks things off by tackling how a good God can even allow evil to exist. And his answer? Well, it all starts with free will.
What you've got to grasp here is the choice Lewis lays out. See, free will isn't just about the ability to choose what's right. It has to include the very real possibility of choosing what's wrong. Lewis basically argues that a world full of little robots or automata, just doing what they're programmed to do, wouldn't have been worth making. Because without that genuine risk of going wrong, you can't have any real love or goodness or joy that actually means something.
This quote really nails it, doesn't it? The whole point, the end goal God has for his creation, isn't just forced obedience. It's a willing, free, voluntary relationship. And like Lewis says right there, for that relationship to be real, his creatures have to be free.
Lewis gives us a really simple analogy to make this make sense. Think about a mother who wants her kids to learn to be tidy for themselves. She has to give them the freedom not to clean up. Now, the messy room that happens next, that's against her will. Of course she'd rather have a clean room, but it was her other will, her will for them to be free, that made the mess possible in the first place. Lewis says this is a lot like God's relationship with the universe. Evil is against his will, but it's made possible because of his higher will for us to be truly free.
So with this freedom on the table, a wrong choice was pretty much bound to happen. Lewis traces the whole problem back to Satan's original sin, which kicked off this long, hopeless project of humanity trying to live without God.
Now, it's really helpful to see what Lewis pinpoints as the original sin. It's not what a lot of people might think. At its core, it was pride. It was this desire to stick yourself in the center of everything, to basically try and be God. And that was the lie, the idea that Satan sold to the human race, that we could be our own masters.
Lewis uses this great analogy of a machine to explain what happened next. God designed the human machine to run on one specific kind of fuel, himself. That's it. There is no other fuel. So when people try to find happiness or peace or anything else apart from God, it's like trying to run your car on water instead of gas. The machine just sputters and breaks down, or as Lewis puts it, it conks.
And Lewis says this broken down attempt is the key to history. He describes all of human history as this long, pretty terrible story of us trying to build some kind of lasting happiness on our own, only to watch it all fall apart. And why? Because we keep trying to run on the wrong fuel. And the results, as you can see from this list, well, they're everywhere, touching every part of our world.
But humanity breaking down wasn't the end of the story. God didn't just scrap the broken machine. No, Lewis says he started this long, slow process of getting things ready for a rescue, taking some very specific preparatory steps. Lewis points out three big things God did. First, he left everyone with a conscience, that built-in sense of right and wrong. Second, he sent what Lewis called good dreams. You know, these stories you find in pagan myths about a god who dies and comes back to life, which was kind of a hint of what was to come. And third, he chose one specific group of people, the Jews, and spent centuries, just as Lewis says, hammering into their heads who he was, which we see all through the Old Testament.
So it was right there, among the Jewish people who had been prepared in such a specific way, that what Lewis calls the real shock happened. A man named Jesus showed up.
Now, to get why this was such a massive shock, you have to get the Jewish view of God at the time. If you're a pantheist, saying something like, I am a part of God, isn't a big deal. But for a Jew, no way. God was the one single being who existed completely outside the world he made. He was totally separate from it. So for some guy to come along and claim to be that God, it was just unthinkable.
So what did this guy do? Well, for starters, he claimed he could forgive sins. And not just sins people committed against him, any sins. Lewis points out that Jesus acted like he was the main person who was wronged in every single offense. That only makes sense if he is the God whose laws are broken by every sin.
Second, he claimed that he had always existed. I mean, right there, that puts him in a totally different category from any other created being. It's a straight-up claim to being eternal, which is something that only belongs to God.
And third, he claimed that he was the one who was going to judge the whole world. In that Jewish context, that was a job for God and God alone. For a man to say he was going to do it was to claim divine authority.
Lewis really doesn't pull any punches here. He basically says that when you look at the context and you look at what this man was actually claiming, what Jesus said was hands down the most shocking thing anyone has ever said.
And all of this leads us to the final piece of Lewis's argument. Because of these absolutely shocking claims, every single one of us is pushed into a choice we cannot avoid. Lewis lays it out as a trilemma.
This is where Lewis goes right after the common, kind of comfortable position a lot of people try to take. He says that this idea of Jesus being just a great moral teacher is the one option that's not on the table. Jesus' own words make that middle-of-the-road view totally impossible. He didn't leave that open for us.
So here's the choice Lewis puts in front of us. A man who was just a man, but said the things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He'd either be a lunatic, and Lewis says on the level of a guy who thinks he's a poached egg, or he'd be something way worse, like a demon from hell. The only other option is that he was and is exactly who he claimed to be, the Son of God.
So, Lewis just leaves us with this challenge. You can write him off as a fool, you can spit at him and call him a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But what you can't do is come away with some patronizing nonsense about him just being a great human teacher. He forces a decision. And the question he leaves for all of us is this: what is your choice?